Hope everybody's doing well today. I want to welcome everybody to the Unimpressed podcast. We have a friend calling in from Estonia, and her name is Kristina Mand-Lakhiani. She is a healer, author, someone of many things that helps a lot of people. Kristina, how are you doing today?
Thank you, John, for having me. I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Nice. So tell me a little bit about traveling all over the world and what is your inner drive that kind of led you down this road?
Well, I actually have traveled around the world, not thanks to the inner drive, but thanks to work and connections. And sometimes people just invite you and you go and visit. But I guess if we start with the foundation, then I was born in a country which actually didn't allow a lot of traveling. For that matter, I was born in Soviet Union. We could not go abroad. So my first trip outside the borders of my country was when I was 18.
And this passion for helping and transforming lives, where did the root of that come from?
I usually say when people ask me about, so I'm co-founder of Mind Valley, one of the biggest platforms in personal growth and transformation. Well, as far as I know, I usually say when people ask me how I ended up doing that it happened by accident and a little bit reluctantly, because as I said, I was born in Soviet Union. So my background was quite skeptical, practical, very far away from personal growth and transformation, far from business. It just happened so that my then husband, Vishen, was very passionate about that. He started a business. And as a good wife, I thought the best thing I can do is help him with his business. But that was a long time ago. Of course, sometimes we accidentally end up in the right place. So years later, all the other things that I was doing, I shed and I dedicated myself to Mind Valley. And initially it was more on the side of publishing other authors, but I guess people's wisdom rubs off you and sooner or later you have something to say of your own. So I transitioned into being mostly just an author, not so much an entrepreneur and publisher about 6-7 years ago.
I have a very similar journey, I think, a little bit, because I had a lot of friends when I lived in California, lived in LA. I had a lot of friends into the, vegan space, the healthy eating, the shakes, Dave Sandoval was a friend who created Purium Health Products. And when I understood the foundation of Dave's food system and started thinking about foundation, I started trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, because I was probably the last guy in the pack. I met a lot of shamans, met all these spiritual people, and no shamans could ever read me or anything for some reason. But I met all these spiritual people, but never really paid attention. But now, later in life, all the things that my friends wanted came to me. And unknowingly, I was that person. Did you have like an epiphany moment to something like that?
It sounds like you were the lucky charm. You charmed all their luck on you. But I think, of course, it rubbed off being in this industry. But I retained a lot of my own Kristina-ness through my journey, for sure. So I think I retain my skepticism that comes from my Soviet upbringing. And my desire to look into the essence of things, and that's I think what makes a huge difference, because a lot of the times when personal growth is quite the industry of fashion nowadays. A lot of people do that, whether they believe or not, but it's getting more and more popular. But I think the remarkable difference is when you see things, the essence of the things. That's what you were talking about when the puzzle for you was the pieces were coming all together. And that, I think, is when an actual transformation happens, when you not just follow the trend or your friends or your peers or your husband, but you actually start seeing into the essence, and that essence starts making sense to you rather than just superficial, the rituals.
How did you feel different?
I can't say that there is this before and after for me, because life is a journey. It's a continuous journey. And I guess the boundary is arbitrary. I'm a different person today than I was yesterday. And I'm definitely a different person today than I was, say, 5 years ago, even 1 year ago. So that border doesn't exist for me. I still keep exploring. I was talking to my parents today about how I was as a young child. And I think that it's an interesting combination of retaining the things that essentially you and changing some other aspects about you. In my case, I definitely became much more decided and maybe pushy, I would say. Pushy in terms of, if something is important for me, I'll keep pushing. Probably more confident. But that comes with age. I think that's the journey for a lot of people. I think so.
Your lineage, did they have any spiritual guidance or anything in your lineage kind of go down this road that you know of?
Well, I have to though make a clarification. I'm not Russian at all. I was born in Soviet Union, and it took me years to understand why the rest of the world thinks Soviet Union was Russia, but it's not exactly what it was. There were other countries which were swallowed up by that huge country. So my heritage is mostly Estonian and a little bit of Polish, mixture with a lot of different nations. But I think, in Europe, everybody's a mixture as well as in the US, everybody's a mixture. Estonians are probably some of the most, now I'm going to talk about religion because before personal growth became the fad, the only way people expressed their spirituality was probably through religion. Estonians are probably the most atheistic people that I know. Their official religion is Methodist and Lutheran. And these are the two very liberal religions which say, you choose your creed when you grow up. My mom, on the other hand, being Polish, is of more conservative background. But in Soviet Union, we didn't understand this kind of things. That was not the ideology. There was religion, but it was forbidden. It was illegal. So the fact that I was, for example, baptized at an early age was more the act of rebellion on the part of my family than expression of their religious beliefs. So I started discovering spirituality when I started dating my then husband, Vishen. I mean, later we became husband and wife. Now we're not anymore. But I started dating Vishen, who was very heavily into that. And he introduced me to Neil Donald Walsh's work. And that was my first introduction to spirituality and to world beyond the laws of physics.
I'm a clairsentient, and my abilities are pretty tense. I'm able to figure things out. I'm able to read people pretty dramatically. If you see something, I see it times 20. If I hear something, I hear it times 20. I don't know. I have a lot of rationales of, Egyptians and pyramids around the world were the indigenous people. And I don't know, that's where I'm at. So I understand that completely. I mean, when you talk about spirituality and you talk about Estonia, this is just what I see. Me understanding stones, and I think stones are like transmitter of energy, and they've been portrayed differently. I think it's just a functionality transmitter, and whatever strength that bloodline behind the transmission is how much response you get. And I feel like there's a lot of energy in Estonia. I mean, do you feel that? Do you feel like you're drawn to Estonia because of the energy, and that's felt like that's your home?
Estonia will forever be my home, of course, but I think we're also such bizarre humans. I've lived 16 years in Malaysia. Now I feel that Malaysia will forever also be my home. And another place where I very much feel like home is, in fact, Amazon rainforest. But probably there are a lot of places like this. But Estonia is where my dad's family is from, where we know our heritage for 400 years. And it just happened so that I inherited the house where my family has lived for 400 years. It's on an island far in the forest. And currently I'm rebuilding it into a family museum. You're right in one aspect, Estonia as well. We are probably some of the most atheistic nations in Europe in terms of religion, the way, contemporary world understands it. Estonians who are rebellious, they insist that we are the religion of the earth. We have our own pagan type of religion, which is much closer to contemporary spirituality, where all the objects in your environment have soul and speak to you and have energy. So this is the kind of religion which is quite popular here, but it's not strictly speaking religion, but the creed or the connection with spirits. Of course, everything here is giving me, in my opinion, strength. Like right now, it's summer, it's bright outside, it's really late in the evening, and I stepped out just into the garden for a moment, and just the smell of the air made me feel very intense emotions, because it reminds me of literally my whole life. This the seasonality here, it's hard to explain, but definitely being where your roots are in gives you very intense, strong, energetic experiences.
How do you use this lineage in with what you do? Do you feel energy? Do you have practices you do daily?
I don't use it consciously for sure because, I've never thought it in that aspect. And I've always respected and loved the history of my families and my ancestors. But I don't directly use it in my work. It hasn't come across probably. And I mean, it would be silly to imagine that it has no influence on me. It definitely has. And in fact, in my book, I do refer to my experiences from the past and to that lineage as well, of course. But it's more an unconscious kind of influence on my work rather than, thought through conscious choice.
With your book and so forth, how do you translate your narrative? If you understand you have this lineage and transformation space, how do you transfer your narrative? Do you feel like I don't know, what direction do you feel like you're going in?
I consider that writing is currently my primary form of self-expression. So I write because I'm a writer, and for me, writing is self-expression in the sense that I don't overanalyze it. When I sit down to write, it comes. Of course, the editing work and the planning work also come together with that process. But the writing itself is usually something which flows through, like any kind of art of self-expression. I've done visual arts before, so it's kind of familiar experience. So I love writing for the sake of this art as well. So for me, it's about just pouring your inner world onto the page without analysis. I'll probably bring a slightly different analogy from my days when I went to art school and we had this annual exhibition of our work. So we produce art throughout the year, and then at the end of the year we hang it on the wall in one place. I mean, every student has their own section of the wall, and then the teachers go and analyze it. And I remember it was such an interesting experience because they would look at my pictures and see in them things that I didn't realize were there. And then when somebody would say like, oh, and this is what she felt probably when she was doing this. And I would think, wow, that's actually true, but I never thought about it this way. So I think with writing, it's similar. I don't overanalyze it in the process. It's later when I start seeing the meaning behind it. So I don't consciously, as I said, as you say, translate what is going on. I just go with the flow.
Is this kind of getting all of the million thoughts out of your head, right? With this latest book, what are you trying to get across? What is on the page?
So it's actually my first book. I've created. I've written short form before, and that's my first book. I've created some programs. So this book is about self-love. It's about finding your path back to you. So and I usually say it's a journey. So it's a journey for a person who's lost to find their way back to themselves and to learn to be at peace with what they find there.
I think that's great timing because I think that narrative, unfortunately, is linear through our whole world. It's funny, I always have to say this on every show, is this rationale of subconscious, right? Your subconscious is being programmed as a kid. And a lot of people don't realize this, and like science will take a topic and they will define a topic. They will define your subconscious. They will define unconscious bias. They will define consciousness. But what people don't realize is science is a one-lane highway. But if you take that, and when I say one-lane highway, is like if a scientist is focusing on a topic, they have to stay in that lane. They will not let you out of that lane and connect things to other. So when you talk about self-love and you understand your subconscious is being programmed, then you get to a point in life where you start responding to things with your unconscious bias. And based on that programming, how heavy that is, and not knowing what that is, that's why people have a hard time getting to consciousness. And I can see the same thing playing out in businesses. It's a very big pattern. There's no self-love because I think we come out, society pushes people a certain direction, and we put all that information in that direction. We forget about ourselves. And then when bad things happen, we forgot about ourselves because we're learning the information here. We're being programmed programmed, right? We're learning information here. So when we start to respond with that unconscious bias, we deflect our energy to someone close to us or someone in our circle, and we're still forgetting about ourselves. So when you talk about self-love, I think that's a big deal. I mean, there's a lot of different angles to crack that. What do you talk about to crack that code? How do you find self-love in your world?
If I may simplify your beautiful explanation to one skill, which I think is incredibly important, is of course awareness, and that starts all with awareness. It's not the main topic of my book at all, but it's more like a necessary tool that you will require through the journey. And a lot of that subconscious, what you said, programming, is because we just don't have the time to pause and start noticing our life the way it is, the way it's happening. The journey that I take the people on is about what happens after you start noticing. After you start noticing the subconscious programming, after you start noticing, all the cognitive biases that you just mentioned. I do talk actually about how our brain tricks us, because I think that it's not even a problem that our brain tricks us or that we are programmed. It's just a natural consequence probably of our biology. The problem is when we are not noticing that, or when we are not honest about that side of our biology. As you know, it's interesting. I talk about honesty, for example, self-honesty in my book, and very often when I ask people about are they honest with themselves, what I've noticed is that usually people who insist that they are definitely 100% brutally honest with themselves are very often those who can't even accept the idea that there is a lot of delusion in our life, whether we like it or not. Even the cognitive biases that you mentioned, but beyond that. So it is an interesting journey, and it's I think the hard work starts when you start noticing that you're not that perfect picture of yourself that you would like to be. And in our industry particularly, this is a huge problem. A lot of people who come to personal growth, they have this idealistic view of what they would like to be, the best version of themselves, which is good in itself. But we have been programmed from childhood to deserve love. So very often what happens is when you have this super high bar, it's really hard to love yourself when you know that you are imperfect. So what we do very often is that we either don't recognize our imperfections and we are faking it in hopes of making it, or when we have the hunch of our imperfections and we don't know how to deal with that, because from childhood, love is used as currency. Our well-meaning parents and peers shower us with love when we behave well, when we do the right things, when we accomplish things, when you're a good girl or a good boy. And then they make a show of withdrawing love when we do something wrong. And of course, that pattern carries on into grown-up life. So I guess the hard work about self-love starts when you start noticing the delusion, the subconscious programming, when you start noticing I'm tempted to say the reality, although philosophically speaking, what is reality? When you start to notice the reality and notice your place in that picture, and this gap between aspiration and the perfectionism and the reality as it is, that's where the struggle starts. Because what I'm trying to say is not that you shouldn't aspire to be better, but you can't not love yourself while you are still imperfect.
If there were no emotions in the world, I mean, that's the biggest juggernaut in the universe is emotion. You could probably predict if there were 10 bloodlines on the face of the planet, you could predict those 10 bloodlines if you take emotions out of it. I think when I hear you say that, I mean, I think that's an angle I've never heard that explanation I've never heard before, which I think is really, really good. It's levels of expression. If you're giving love, taking love away, whatever the level of that is, when you get older, that's going to be the separation from giving and, taking away and giving. It's going to be tougher for some people and maybe not as tough for some, because that's the pattern they've been in their life.
Well, definitely, there's a lot of we do use love as currency as a society. Although maybe love is a little strong word, but let's take the usual culprit, the social media. A lot of transactions that happen in that universe are dictated by likes or dislikes. in a way. So that's the same kind of pattern of, you do the right thing, you get the admiration, the love, the support. You do the wrong thing, that is being withdrawn from you. It happens, in any kind of, let's say at work, in school for sure. Work probably is a little bit more complex to generalize. In relationships between people, our friends, how often do we, if we disagree with a friend or if they upset us, we actually make a show of not wanting that friendship anymore. So that currency is used in our society very, very liberally. We give love when we feel like it, when we feel that somebody is doing whatever they're doing according to our expectations, and we take it back when that somebody doesn't meet our expectations. Now, reality doesn't have to fit our expectations. Not only does it not have to fit our expectations, it will not. There will be things which we don't like. So if we put conditions on love, in my opinion, it's a slippery slope.
What you're saying, in a way, we were talking about this today, is kind of the biggest con in the world, because when you take it to a surface, whatever it is, social media, and you're not really expanding on your sensibilities and what your sensibilities do, and you live that way for a long time, and then you get into the world, and guess what? You can't communicate.
Yeah.
You're guessing, and nothing is natural.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a huge deal. I've looked at the pattern of this process, but the angle of what you're saying with love is, I've never thought of that angle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a learning curve for me to add in the mix. But don't you agree? It's a big deal where it's eliminating your sensibilities on the way we're responding to these love type of situations, right? So when you actually are one-on-one with another human being, you don't know how to communicate. I see that playing out in my daughter's life. She's 17 years old, and they have a problem communicating with each other. Boys and girls communicating together because they're used to communicating through this thing. You know what I mean?
I think that the contemporary world is so curious. A lot of things are much more than before. And definitely, at least research says that younger people have hard times, for example, committing into relationships. And I guess that's partially the symptom of not being able to communicate, to connect. Definitely people are more disconnected despite us being closer to each other, technically speaking. I know that there's a lot of research that says that the rates of people feeling loneliness are through the roof, nothing like it was before. And yes, definitely you don't need even research to realize that people are disconnecting while trying to connect to everyone at the same time. So definitely that's a problem. And whatever we as humanity carry as our handicaps from before are probably even more aggravated, because when I was young, for example, before the internet time, before the computer time, I remember how we communicated. We would visit each other and yell from the street, "Hey, are you coming out?" Or knock on the door, if we were not so lazy. I still use that at work sometimes. I would walk up to my colleagues and use my old-fashioned approach and look them in the eye, and then they don't know how to react because they're just not used to human interaction. But even in those days, of course, we still were kind of silly when it came to emotions and to understanding each other. And I think very often it's because we're so obsessed with our reaction to the world that we sometimes don't notice the world independently from our reaction to it. Like something happens, rather than looking at it as an objective event that just happened and had probably nothing to do with us, we see everything through the prism of how does it affect me. A very simple practical example would be somebody snaps it at you at work, and our natural, human beings' natural reaction is that, what a jerk, why are you angry with me, what have I done to you? It's through the prism of myself, rather than wondering, I wonder what's going on with that person. Are they under stress? Why is that? Why are they behaving like that? So I think we are very often so obsessed with our own reaction to the world that we don't notice the world because of that. Because our own reaction also elicits really strong emotions, and naturally, when you have strong emotions, your ability to see things clearly diminishes. So I guess what I'm trying to say that, yes, contemporary world is definitely making it harder, but we also carry quite a lot of, sorry for the simple word, but quite a lot of silliness from past generations.
If you're carrying something through and then it's perpetuated, then the situation gets worse. I mean, in a way too, it almost puts a lot of pressure on people where it creates a non-confidence issue as well, because if you're seeing things through a lens and you're trying to make yourself look perfect, through that lens, that's putting a lot of pressure on yourself when you probably don't have to.
True.
We had a conversation about that actually today, talking about how people put pressure on themselves and almost cuts off their nose to spite their face in their careers, in their life, whatever they're trying to achieve, because their view is limited. It's a limited view. They're not experiencing anything with their sensibilities. So it creates like a non-confidence, hesitation to move forward properly with whatever you want to accomplish in life.
Or you will put yourself in this very thick cocoon and just comet through your world, blasting the path. But that is actually how we come back to the idea of why are we starved of self-love? When we start seeing our imperfections and we want so much to be perfect, it's not even that you try to show yourself perfect to the world. That would be half the problem. The problem is that we want to feel that we are good. We want to feel that we are right. When we are having an argument, it's not even, if you were to ask yourself sincerely, and I'm talking to the audience right now, not to you, John, directly. If you were to ask yourself,
to me anything. You can say anything to me. It doesn't.
I just don't want to make assumptions. But let's say if there's an argument and you, a heated argument where you get very emotional and you ask yourself seriously what actually irritates you. Very often we understand that we can't really change another person, but what irritates us is this crippling feeling that what if I'm wrong? What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not able to drive my point across? And all those things. What if something is wrong with me? This is much more painful than just the simple idea of you having an argument with another person. And it's exactly because of those experiences where we feel that we're not good enough. And good enough by whose standards? By your inflated idea of a perfect version of yourself. That's when we come back to that deeply rooted program that love has to be earned. I actually quite sincerely heard people asking me, I mean, the question was sincere by some of the people, isn't self-criticism good? It makes you want to grow. Or isn't some healthy level of, self-hate good for you? This is such a crazy idea that you have to deprive yourself of your own self-love just because you're not perfect.
Here's another rationale I came up with. If you create a new environment for yourself, compared to society, most society feeds off what we see. So if we feed off what we see, that creates more opinions and more controversy. But when you create that new environment, you're going to eliminate opinions, you're going to eliminate controversy, and you're kind of ahead of the narrative. If you are present for yourself and you're leading with being present, then you're not really feeding off what you see. And I think people have to get out of that group, lead with their own narrative, and then they can maybe start to experience those things like you're talking about, in real life.
I would actually encourage people to maybe even take a step back closer to themselves and ask maybe a little bit philosophical question. But what is it that you see? And why do you see what you see? And now I understand from our conversation that you understand psychology quite well. In psychology, there's this interesting phenomenon. It's not in psychology, it's actually brain science. There's this region in the brain called reticular activating system, which, if we simplify that, defines what you notice, because there is a lot of stimuli in our environment, and what we notice is defined by what is our goal. So there are very simple ways to see how it works in practice. But if I simplify that idea, it is basically this: whatever you focus on is what you will start seeing, what you start noticing. Your goal defines your perception. So when your goal changes, your perception can change. And what I've noticed, which is really strange, that exactly the same circumstances, if you have a group of people observing them, the different people, depending on their framework, on their belief system, on their focus, on their perception, see very different things. They notice very different things. So very often the question is, it's tempting to change your environment. And of course, it makes sense to change environments in certain circumstances. But sometimes, if that's the solution, you end up running away. But no matter where you go, you will not run away from yourself. That person you'll carry everywhere with you. So if you change environment after environment after environment and you still end up in the same kind of predicament, then makes sense. Even before that, it makes sense to ask yourself, what is my role in what is going on?
I mean, I agree. I guess I should have prefaced that as obviously instead of feeding off what you see, you do what you're saying is you do have to find yourself. Running to different environments until you find yourself is not going to improve anything. I agree with that 110%. When you find yourself, and you have that focus to put yourself out front. Sometimes I say things and think people are on the same page, and I should probably backtrack because my mind is like,
I have that thing too. I assume that people know the context.
I agree 110%. You definitely, because I did it myself. I was a point in my life where I was depressed and didn't know where I was headed. And finally, when I found John, everything else started working out, and and when I found myself, it wasn't like a big drastic feeling or change or anything. I just know that I knew myself better and I knew what direction I had to go. So I guess your direction, you need to get out front of these narratives that are holding you in these circles that can be damaging to your life and who you are. Your narrative and book is creating this awareness. Can we unravel this whole scenario of this world?
Well, my book is about your relationship with yourself, mostly. I do believe that your relationship with the world is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. It's continuation of that same idea that I just shared. And surprisingly, it ends with this simple idea that there are no recipes in life, in fact. And, when you were just explaining that, I probably took your words in a different context. Yes, the thing is that sometimes you have to stick to your environment and stay with yourself until the victory. And sometimes you have to pack and leave as soon as possible. And that's the interesting thing about life. And I've been in personal growth for 20 years. There are no recipes in life. And that's the sad answer to some people because, in our superficial world, we love the tutorials. Give me the 1, 2, 3. Give me what to do and what not to do. But very often you have to just be present with life. Something which you have been talking about, that we are not even present with what's going on. So you have to be just noticing and making your own choices and making your own decisions, because what works for you today might not work for you needed 5 years ago. So my book is literally a book about the most important relationship in anybody's life, relationship with yourself, and just about that.
You're at home, you're in Estonia, and you're building a museum. What is this house? I'd like to see what that looks like. What is this house you're doing out there, with the museum and stuff?
So I don't talk very often in my work environment about that because it's a different project. But so I have family lineage until 1632 placed in that spot in Estonia. It's an island in the forest, and it's a farm because Estonians were never rich or nobles. So it's a farm with quite a lot of land and some seaside, some half a kilometer of beach. And the house itself is about 100 years old, but the oldest part is about 200 years old. It's a little bit of a mutant because families have lived there and they've rebuilt it to suit them. But because it's so far away and inaccessible, nobody has lived there for 35 years. So when COVID hit, I moved back to Estonia from Malaysia, where I spent most of my adult life. So I've been here for about 3 years, and the universe conspired on my behalf, and I started renovating something which has been standing there for centuries. So right now it's in the process of renovation. So the picture is not very pleasing, but it's moving fast.
If someone wants to find your book, where do we find your book?
The best place to find my book is actually on Mindvalley's website. It would be mindvalley.com/flawsome, but flawsome is written with an E. So FL. Gosh, I can't spell it. Such an American habit. FLAWESOME. That's how you find my book, and it comes with bonuses if it's on our website. It's going to be available in all the bookshops.
The more these linear pieces come into play, it's crazy to me that you can see these patterns pretty much anywhere you go, right? And if people don't wake up, all the narratives are exhausted. So if we don't reset now, I don't know how much more nonsense can be created, because it's almost getting laughable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and scary as well, because I think we are like little kids with a loaded gun, and I just hope that that I'll have a nice planet to pass to my children.
Well, this has been Kristina Mand-Lakhiani. I'm John Edmonds Cosma, the CEO of Bang Productions.